Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Lucy Moore and I'm a Professional Education Manager at ACCA. Our session today is designed to support you in your preparation for a Strategic Professional computer-based exam. And I'm really pleased to be joined by an ACCA colleague, James Patrick. James is Head of Professional Education Solutions at ACCA and he's responsible for the support we offer to both students and tutors. And my focus is specifically on student support, such as the webinar we're running today. I'm going to start our session today by giving you a quick introduction, an introduction to or a reminder of Strategic Professional CBEs and why ACCA has introduced them. And we're then going to be taking a tour of our exam support for Strategic Professional CBE, talking through the various resources available, but really focusing in on our key piece of support, which is the Practice Platform, as well as giving you some guidance on recommended approaches and techniques for using the CBE functionality and the workspace effectively, helping you to prepare for exam success. We'll then look at some of the frequently asked questions we receive about Strategic Professional CBEs before hopefully having enough time to move into a live Q&A session. Please note that we can't guarantee responding to everyone directly, either verbally or via web chat, but we hope that the questions we choose to share will be helpful to everyone. So if you would like to ask a question, then please click on the Q&A button and submit your question there, and we will come on to that at the end. So just to recap the agenda, I'll give a short introduction to what Strategic Professional CBE is, just in case it's new for some of you. We're then going to take a tour of our resources, thinking about how best to prepare for the CBE, focusing on the practice platform, and then thinking about how to approach the exam, manage the workspace effectively. And then we've got the FAQs and a live Q&A. Okay, so let's get going. So, why did ACCA introduce Strategic Professional CBEs? Well, the world doesn't stand still, and neither does ACCA. We've got a long history now, and throughout that history, we've worked really hard to innovate, from basing the ACCA qualification on IFRS to introducing tax and law variants across the globe. We're always looking for ways to adapt and enhance our offering to meet the changing needs of the accountancy profession. And now, more than ever before, the role of the professional accountant is changing. So we're digitally transforming our strategic professional exams to make sure that our qualification continues to produce the finance professionals the world needs. Now, we started the rollout of Strategic Professional CBE in March 2020 in selected markets. Like our applied skills CBEs, they incorporate the primary tools that finance professionals use on a daily basis, including spreadsheets and word processors. And we're the first accountancy body to use this particular type of technology for these sorts of assessments. And the approach that we've taken is completely endorsed by both our regulators and employers. Now, this second slide here, just another sort of introductory slide. This is just to give you a little bit of context. Now, you're likely joining this webinar today because you're going to be sitting a Strategic Professional CBE in March, so just a few weeks away. But for anyone with us today who isn't sitting a CBE in March, maybe that's coming for you later this year, then this is just a little bit of an overview of the rollout process that we've taken. On screen, you can see a screenshot from our website. So some of the key points about the rollout: paper is being withdrawn as CBE is introduced, and this allows you to continue your digital journey from the applied skills exams. Some of our variant and adapted exams are moving to CBEs at a later date. We have an exam method page in the student section of the website, and the link to that page is just at the bottom of the screen there. And you're able to look up your particular market in that, look up in this little drop down here to see, so search by your location to see when CBE is going to be available for you. And it has the information on there as well about when the variant and adapted exams are moving to CBE. So like I said, you can find full details of everything that you need on that page. We just wanted to show you this just as a kind of a quick intro and context setting. Right, now this is what we want to focus on. And here you can see, this is the resource I mentioned that's available in the resources section. It's there as a PDF. it brings together all of our resources for Strategic Professional CBE into one place. It's an interactive guidance document, so it has some information about each of the resources on it, as well as clickable links. So if you download that PDF from the webinar resources section, then it is your easy, effortless route through to all of the resources you need to prepare for a Strategic Professional CBE. And we're going to spend the rest of this session literally just taking a tour of these resources, so from 1 down through to 8 there, starting with the introductory resources. So as you can see on this screenshot, each of our exams in the resource finder has a CBE introduction page, and on that page you can find a variety of things to ease you into what a CBE is for that particular exam, to help you understand what they're like. And we have a video on there which introduces SPCBEs, and additional resources to enable you to become more familiar with the CBE environment. And as I mentioned, you can see the red boxes along the top left of the screen. The PDF that is available for you to download gives the exam-specific links for those introductory resources. The next resource that's covered in that guide is the CBE guidance document. Now, this is a fantastic reference resource to use when you start using the practice platform, which we're going to come on to in a bit more detail. But it gives you information, additional information about the functionality that you can find in the exam environment. And we have 2 versions of this guidance document. The screenshot that you can see there covers SBR, AFM, APM, ATX and AAA, and we also have an SBL specific version, simply because some of the terminology we use in that exam is a little bit different. Okay, right, this is where it starts to get really interesting. This is the key resource that's available for students for Strategic Professional CBE, the ACCA Practice Platform. It allows you to practice exam standard questions using software that replicates the real exam environment, both in terms of how it looks and feels, but also, really importantly, functionality. It includes some fantastic tools as well to help you mark your own work as you complete practice questions. This is a behaviour that we know really contributes to exam success, so we're trying to encourage students to do this wherever possible. Now, what I'm going to do next is actually play you a pre-recorded video which gives you a tour of the platform and an introduction to what it can offer. And once the video stops playing, then James will pick up and he's going to kind of pick up on some of the points that have been raised in the video about the practice platform, giving you more information about this really important resource. So I'm going to start the video in a moment. Don't worry if it takes a few seconds to load at your end. It should start working very quickly. Okay. So I'm going to give you a short demo of the practice platform, predominantly from the perspective of the student experience, but some of what I show you will also give you an idea of how tutors can interact with it. This is the dashboard. On the top left of the screen, you'll see we have various tabs. We're on the Home tab at the minute, and we'll look around this a bit more in a moment. Next to that, we have the Mark tab, which is where students can mark answers they've completed. The Results tab is where they can see those marked responses, and the Performance tab is where they can review their progress across the various tests they've done. I also want to show you the Help functionality, which is accessed via this question mark icon. And it contains lots of really detailed user guidance, as you can see, including FAQs to support users when they're getting started with the platform. So on the left-hand side of the homepage here, we have the assigned material section. ACCA approved learning partners can request their own instance of the platform, which would be branded with their corporate colours and logo, and they can then assign content to their students via this instance. And this area is where students would access that content. If I scroll down, you'll see there's also a self-assigned material section, and this is where students can access material they've assigned to themselves from the content that's been made available by ACCA. And that content comes from the catalogue on the right-hand side, which covers the core applied skills and strategic professional exams. We have a specimen for each exam, as well as other practice tests, which are based on past exam content, and these will always be kept up to date for any syllabus changes. So let's have a look at how we access content in the catalogue. I'm going to select Advanced Performance Management, click on ACCA Official Resources, and then the specimen. Before I assign that to myself, I just want to mention the blank workspace you can see listed here. There's one of these listed under every exam in the catalogue. They don't contain any question content, but they give students the opportunity to complete printed practice questions they may have access to in the CBE environment, which is a really nice example of the platform's flexibility. So let's assign this APM specimen. If I scroll back to self-assigned material, you can see it's appeared there. Now, I'm going to open this test shortly so that I can create a pretend answer to a question to allow us to look at the marking functionality. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you a really key piece of functionality in the practice platform, which allows students to download exams to complete offline later on. And this has real benefits for our students in markets where the internet maybe isn't reliable, or where it's common not to have your own permanent internet connection, or where data costs are prohibitively high. So if I click on those three dots, just move that button across to the right, you'll see a notification has come up confirming that that exam has been saved for offline use. And what that means is if I were to go offline, reopen my browser, go back to the URL at the top, this APM specimen would load for me. I could then complete it offline. It would be saving locally to my machine. And then when I'm back online, the answers I've completed would upload to the system to be available for marking. So let's open this APM specimen. Now, as you know, the practice platform completely replicates the look and feel of the real exams, and that includes these instruction screens I'm just clicking through. So we're really giving students the real exam experience. And here we are on the first question of the APM specimen. This is a typical layout for our strategic professional content, and it's exactly how it would look in the real exam. The question requirements are available here, and below that the response options. If I open the word processor, you'll see I can move the window around and resize it, and I can do the same with an exhibit. I can also copy the information in the exhibit. So I select it, I'm doing Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste it into the word processor. And all of this functionality that I'm showing you is exactly the same as in the real exam. I am just going to very quickly reformat that answer a bit, which doesn't take very long. And there we have a pretend answer that we can go on to mark in a moment. I would just like to show you this nice tool here, which is a print button, and this allows students to either print or save as PDF an answer that they can then send to a tutor to get feedback. Before we submit the answer, just to say there is a lot of functionality on this screen. There's quite, it's quite detailed. And we have a really nice package of wraparound support for our students for the Strategic Professional CBEs. For example, each exam has a series of videos which talk students through a really methodical approach to tackling them. And the practice platform then gives them that environment in which they can practice those techniques we've shown them before the real thing. So if we pretend that we've completed this exam, I'll just navigate through to the final question and end the exam. We come back to the home page, and then we can go to the Mark tab, and you'll see the APM specimen appears there. So this is the marking screen. This marking area is the same for both students and tutors. At first glance, it does look a bit involved, maybe a bit technical, but it's intuitive to use. And we're really encouraging students to take advantage of this marking functionality. It is not just for tutors, there's lots that students can gain from it as well. On the left-hand side, we have the marking guidelines, and the sample answer can also show here as well. I can zoom in if I want to, scroll up and down, zoom out. To flick between the marking guidelines and the sample answer, I go to the right-hand side. If I just click there, the sample answer appears, and click back on marking guidelines, and that brings that back up. In the middle here, we have our question content, just in case we need to refer to it at any point during marking. But I'm actually just going to click on that arrow to minimize it. Here we have the pretend answer that we generated. That's in the word processor tab. If we'd entered anything into the spreadsheet response area, that would show here. To mark an answer effectively, we suggest to students that they work through it, comparing it to the sample answer or the marking guidelines, working out what points would have generated them credit, which areas are perhaps weaker, and making notes about any areas they'd want to revisit. So to illustrate this and how it works, I'm going to turn on tick marking mode, which activates these buttons at the top. I then need to identify the part of the question that I want to mark. So I'm just going to click on that button there. I can now minimize this area of the screen as well, and we now have a really nice clean space for marking. So I select the tick button, and then I can start assigning myself marks. So maybe for the first couple of points there, I think I've earned 1 mark for each of them. Maybe down here I refer to the marking guidelines and I think, no, actually I've done well there, that's worth a bit more, and I give myself 3 marks. And if I want to maybe make a note for myself about an area that I want to revise in more detail, I can just select it and then add the note and save it there. So that's how the marking functionality works. When we looked at the dashboard, you'll remember I showed you there were some tabs for results and performance. This is my test account, so I don't have any true historical performance in here, but if we go back to the slides, we have a screenshot from the results tab to give you an idea of what students see there.
Hi, well, just to finish off where Lucy's video left off, she mentioned the results tab, which is what we're looking at now. So we're just taking a screen grab of the results tab. And here is where you would get access to questions or exams that have been marked either by yourself or perhaps your tutor if you're studying with an ALP. So all we're looking at here is an example where we've selected the SBL March 19 exam. The progression over time, perhaps not relevant particularly relevant because it's showing this particular user has attempted it 3 times, which is maybe asking a little bit too much, but you can see progression over time and their mark is improving, which is great. Probably more important though is on the right hand side, you can see we've got question 1. If we were to click on that question 1, that's where we get to see our answer and we get to see how it's been marked and where marks have been allocated and any comments that have been left by the marker, whether it's our tutor or perhaps ourselves as well. So the results tab is where you go to see your marked script. That's the main point to take away. Performance, by all means, have a look at the performance tab as well when you're up and running with the platform. But again, it just shows you in various formats how you've been progressing over time with the questions and the tests that you've attempted. So might be of interest, but really the main area to focus on after you've completed and marked a question or a test is this results tab. This is where you get access to your marked answers. Hopefully you found Lucy's video informative. Before we move on, we just wanted to pull out some key areas where we've had feedback from students saying that they've particularly found these areas useful. So this is based on, like I say, student feedback. They've used the platform and they've said, look, you know, these are the top areas that we've used and we'd recommend to our peers. Lucy mentioned the blank workspaces, so to just reinforcing the message here that there's so much flexibility that you can get from using them. So for all of the exams, for all of the subjects, whether it's applied skills, strategic professional, there is blank workspace versions of tests on the platform for you to have a look at. And all I'm showing on screen here is a PDF version of a past exam. So I think I've got March 20, an exam from March 20 on the left-hand side. And on my screen, I've just rearranged windows. So I've got the PDF of a past exam question just from the website, from our website on the left-hand side. And I've just aligned my practice platform window on the right-hand side. And I've tried to recreate as close as possible the exam environment using the blank workspace and using a PDF question. And hopefully that gives you an idea of exactly the sort of thing that you can do with this blank workspace. You know, I've taken a PDF question from the ACCA website, one of the past exams. You could put any question you wanted up on there. And you can just align your windows and try and recreate that exam environment. Not exactly the same, of course, but pretty close. And obviously entering your answers into the word processor, into the slide response area, into the spreadsheet is still, you know, brilliant practice. So worth a go, taking advantage of that flexibility. One thing that I'll mention that will lead on nicely to the other main tip, or the next main tip, is that if you're using the blank response area, make sure that you save and or print your responses before you shut it down. And that's because it's a blank version of the software. It's not linked to any particular question on the platform. So if you were to finish it or close it down or submit it, it won't go anywhere. It can't go anywhere for marking. As I say, it's not associated with a particular question. So definitely recommend making use of the blank workspace. If you want to save your responses though, guys, just make sure that you're doing that before you close it down when you're using the blank workspace. As I say, that leads us on nicely to talk about tip number 2, printing and saving. Now, Lucy showed really well in the video, very clearly in the video, how marking works, how the marking software works, and we'll talk about that more again in just a moment. But again, you've got a bit of flexibility here to actually export your answers out of the platform. And that might be because you want to maybe print it out and share it with your tutor or share it with a peer. You might want a PDF record of your answer again to perhaps submit to your tutor for review. Whatever the reason, guys, you have got the flexibility for saving your answers from the platform. And you can see hopefully on the screen now, on the slide that we've got up now, if you're using a word processor at strategic professional level, there's that print icon. If you're using a spreadsheet, either at applied skills or strategic professional level, you just go into the edit drop-down menu, and down the bottom you've got the print functionality, and the slides work the same as the word processor. One area not shown on screen, just to give you the complete picture, if you're looking at an applied skills exam and you're looking at a constructed response word processor area, there's no icon. But what you have to do is just make sure you've selected somewhere within the word processor and then hit Control and P, and that will bring up the print menu and you can save your answer. So just to recap, any of your answers, whether it's a strategic professional or the constructed response answers for applied skills, you can export and save your answer, just to give you that extra bit of flexibility. And again, at risk of repeating ourselves slightly, but just again want to highlight the importance and the value you can get from the marking process. So Lucy went through it in a video, showed you how it works, and we just really would recommend that you do try and take the time to thoroughly review your answer. There's so much that you can learn from marking your own answer. Hopefully having the ability to mark your answer within the platform using the sort of software that the real life markers use will make it more interesting for you. It's tough, isn't it? You know, you've spent time trying to do a tough question to time. It's hard to be motivated to then see it through and review your answer in detail. But you know, maybe have a break, come back, look at this afresh, and then use the software, as I say, to almost replicate what the real marker is doing. So things you're looking out for is looking at the marking guidelines for areas that you could have mentioned in your answer, looking at the model answer for a bit more detail, although of course noting that the model answer is far too long. It's not something that would be achievable in the time available. Why not make use of the ability to make notes on the platform? So up on screen here we can see this particular user has made a note on their answer where they need to perhaps go into a little bit more detail. You could even capture areas in a notepad that you want to go back and revisit. So as I say, marking within the platform hopefully makes it a bit more interactive, a bit more interesting, and it really is, as I'm sure your tutors are telling you, it really is something that can add value to your preparation towards your exam. Lucy, back to you for some more resources.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so we're just going to cover the rest of the resources that were on that PDF that I showed you at the beginning, so 4 through to 8. Now that we've had that kind of focus time on the practice platform, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the other resources available, and we're then going to show you another video on how to manage your CBE workspace effectively. And again, following the video, James will continue to give you some more advice on how you can approach the exam, bearing in mind some of the tips from the video that I just mentioned. Okay, so the rest of the resources that are on the one-page guidance document all support you in how to approach the exam successfully. So I'll just work through these in order. So number 4 there, we have the CBE preparation videos. These are fantastic videos. They were created to coincide with the launch of Strategic Professional CBE. We have a set of 4 videos for each exam. And across the 4 videos, that we try to set out a really methodical approach that you can take, breaking it down into simple, easy to digest chunks. And we suggest a variety of tips and techniques for approaching the exam. And the entire set of 4 videos will take you no longer than 15 minutes in total to watch. So I would strongly recommend that you have a look at those before you start your preparation in any great depth. And again, you've got those links on the PDF, so please do download it from the resources section. Moving on to number 5, we have CBE preparation webinars. Now, these were run before the first Strategic Professional CBE exam session. So that must be about a year ago now, but they're still available on demand because they were really, really valuable sessions, and the advice in them still stands, which is why we still include them in this guidance document. They include a practical demonstration from an expert tutor showing you how to work through a question in the CBE environment and how to use the CBE functionality effectively. Under number 5 as well, you also have a link to this webinar, so that you can easily access it on demand. Moving down to number 6, we have March 2020 review videos. So they are just what it sounds like they are. We had expert tutors review the first Strategic Professional CBEs, so the March 2020 exams, referring to examiner feedback and explaining the exam approach that should have been taken to certain questions in the exam. So they, again, are really worth a look. Moving down on to number 7 now, the effective workspace management video. So that's actually the video that I'm going to play you in a second. And that video shares tips and tricks to make it more efficient for you when you're attempting questions in the real exam. Things like don't have more windows open at one time than you need, and you'll see a bit more information about how you can go about that when I play the video. And then last on the list there, number 8, how to succeed webinars. Now these again are available on demand, and they recap the support that we have available for Strategic Professional CBE. They share an expert tutor's top tips for approaching the exam, and they also cover guidance on effective workspace management, which is what we're going to come on to in a moment. So I'm going to play you another video. This one's shorter. This is about 3 minutes long. And once the video ends, James will come back and he's got a series of screenshots to share with you, which illustrate some of the principles around our kind of best recommended practice for approaching the exam. Okay. Just as you need an overall strategy for how you approach the exam as a whole, you should also have a strategy for managing the different windows within the exam workspace. This video will provide you with the guidance you need to manage your exam workspace effectively. Our first piece of advice is to only have windows open when you need them. This avoids you having too much open on your screen at one time, allowing you to focus on the task at hand. One way you can minimise the number of windows open in your workspace is by copying the requirements into the appropriate response option. It's worth noting that sometimes the detailed requirements are found in the exhibits. And for some questions, you may need to have 2 response options open at the same time. Remember, numerical answers should be produced in the spreadsheet so the marker can access your workings. Written answers should go in the word processor. You can reference between the two by labelling each part of your answer clearly. Another way you can minimise the number of open windows is, when analysing the exhibits, only having one open at a time where possible. As you go through the exhibits one by one, you can either copy key information into your response option or highlight it, making it easier for you to find later in the exam. This means you don't need to have all of your exhibits open throughout the exam. You can open them as and when you need to. Our second key piece of advice is to have set places on your screen for the different windows. This may be different for each exam. Here you can see that we have the word processor on the right and the requirements on the left. If, as part of your overall exam strategy, you're planning on using the scratch pad, remember to dedicate an area in your workspace for this. This is one example of how you can have your screen set up, but remember you can choose the layout that's best for you. The important thing here is that you have an approach and you apply it consistently. Our third piece of advice for effective workspace management is, where possible, to ensure you're not covering the top and bottom toolbars, to make it easier to access these functions. Use the practice platform to plan and test your strategy for managing your workspace effectively. Continue to practice your approach so it comes naturally to you on the day of the exam, giving you the best chance of exam success.
So as Lucy mentioned, we thought it might be useful to give you an illustration of how you can put the approach videos, the CBE approach videos and that workspace video into practice. So what we've got here are some screenshots showing how we would apply the CBE approach videos to SBL. So I just picked SBL because it's probably the exam with the most content potentially up on screen at one time. You know, it's just one workspace, isn't it? You've got a number of exhibits to address, but these messages, this approach can be applied to any SP exam. We've just chosen SBL for an example. Now, just for context, what I'm showing you on screen now and all of the screenshots were done on my work laptop, which has got a 14-inch screen, which I don't think is particularly big. It's a few years old, so it's not a particularly modern fancy laptop. It's a fairly standard laptop, and we've done this because we think that this is pretty indicative of what students would be looking to achieve. So as I say, 14-inch laptop, fairly old machine. Hopefully this is a reasonable, real life indication of what can be achieved using the CBE software. So what we're looking at now, you might well recognize, is just the instruction screens at the start. Now in your live exam, you've got 10 minutes to have a look through this. You'll be familiar really with the instruction screens from having used the practice platform, hopefully. So you can use the 10 minutes just to compose yourself, have a few deep breaths, or you can just skip the 10 minutes and get stuck straight in, entirely up to you. But it's there if you want it, that 10 minutes at the start of your exam for the instruction screens. When you're ready to start, you just are asked to double check whether you're ready. So hit yes. As soon as you hit yes in the live exam, your time starts counting down as you would expect. Now, for SBL, using our example, you're obviously straight into the desktop, the digital desktop, the workspace, whatever we wanted to call it. And we're now really starting to put that recommended exam approach into practice. So quite a lot of information potentially on screen. You've got all of the exhibits on the left-hand side. You've got a number of tasks on the left-hand side as well. And if we scroll down on the left-hand side, you've got your various response options as well. You've then got the information, the overall information on the right-hand side as well. So quite a lot for us to look at. We need to try and be as methodical as possible. And the perfect starting point for SBL is, as we've highlighted in red up on the screen, just try and get an understanding of what our role is at a very high level, what our role is going to be for the duration of this exam. Now, in this particular example, we've used one of the SBL specimens. We're a management consultant throughout the case study. Fine. That might vary from SBL exam to SBL exam. We might take on different roles depending on the tasks. But in this particular one, we're a management consultant throughout the whole case study. Fine. We could then have a little skim through the list of exhibits just to get a feel for the sort of information we've been provided with. And all we're really doing here for the first couple of minutes, just starting to familiarise ourselves with our role and the overall sorts of information that we've been provided with. What we would do next for SBL is to move on and look at Exhibit 1. Now, for SBL, Exhibit 1 is always going to give us an overview of the exam scenario. So it's going to build on that first sentence that we saw on the main workspace on the desktop with a bit more detail about that exam scenario. So we do need to invest time just making sure we're getting to grips with the bigger picture. And you can see on the screen, hopefully I've made use of the highlighting functionality just to highlight a few bits from the exhibit. So I've highlighted my pretend name for the next 4 hours. So I'm Hoi Louis, a management consultant, as we know. And ultimately, we know that the task's going to point towards producing a consultancy report for the directors of our client, Data Communication Services, or DCS, as we'll refer to them moving forward. Next paragraph's got some really useful information for us. So 2 product areas. Our client has 2 product areas. So the manufacturer of data communication components. And then the second area is the supply and support contracts for more specialist IT management network systems. So fundamental stuff here, guys. We would need to take our time working through that exhibit to understand the really high level important aspects of this particular case study. We're a qualified accountant, as we'd expect, and then we're told about our colleague Danny, and we're told, as we knew really, that we're starting to prepare the consultancy report and the associated tasks for DCS company. So we're only a few minutes in here. We understand who we are. We know a little bit about our client already. And we know that we're producing this consultancy report. So the tasks, when we look at them, are going to start to give us a bit more detail about the areas of the consultancy report that we need to be addressing. So I've looked at Exhibit 1. Screen management, workspace management, not really an issue at this stage. We've just got Exhibit number 1 open, so it's not really a factor for us. On the next screen, however, you can start to see good workspace management start to become a factor. So what I'm showing here on the left hand side is one of the tasks. So I've got task 1B up just for illustration. It could have been any of the tasks. And on the right hand side, I've got the word processor response area. Now, the reason I'm showing that is that we would recommend, and you can see this in the SBL CBE exam approach videos, we recommend that your planning process begins by taking the tasks from the task windows and actually pasting them into the word processor response one by one. And then what you can do is start to break down those tasks to give your answer some structure. Okay, so you can imagine, hopefully, having that word processor on the right hand side, leaving it up there, and then one by one, just working your way through those task windows, moving them to the left-hand side and taking the relevant content from the task windows and putting it into the word processor. And it really is, it might sound like quite an admin or administrative type task, copying and pasting content, but hopefully on the right-hand side in that word processor area, you can start to see the benefit that we're getting. So you can see taking task A, part 1, we're asked to do an analysis of the industry and market in which DCS is operating in. And I've added a couple of bullet points there. We're told to use an appropriate model. Well, I'm thinking Porter's 5 forces. I'm thinking PEST or maybe PESTLE. And I'm saying, well, 15 marks for this particular task. Remember, we know we've got 2 different markets. If we had 6 or 7 marks per market, we're passing that first task really nicely. And again, it's that thought process of saying, okay, well, look, 15 marks, actually, if we break it down, then we can split that between the 2 markets. If I'm using a model, let's say Porter's 5 forces, well, actually, for 2 markets, 5 headings each, I only really need 1 point under each of those 5 headings for each of the markets, and I'm already at a comfortable pass. And this is the thought process that we're investing in, guys. You know, breaking down that task, thinking about our structure. Haven't looked at any of the exhibits apart from exhibit 1 yet, have we? But we're already starting to think about the structure for our answer. And, you know, we can carry that on. So we can look at the task 1, part 2, A part 2, which is an evaluation of the performance of the company using integrated reporting. And you can see that we've got evaluation professional skills marks here for a further 4 marks. So, you know, again, don't know if you can see it on screen, you can refer back to it later, but you know, we're saying evaluation, we need some sort of conclusion. We know that from an integrated reporting perspective, there's 6 headings. So if we had 2 marks per heading plus an evaluation at the end, actually the 16 marks available for this task do become a little bit more achievable. Now, and as I say, heading for each of the integrated reporting areas, we know what our structure is going to be, which is great. Okay, so that's stage 1 of our planning process. Let's move on to stage 2. And again, workspace management is going to be crucial here. So we've got an exhibit open here. So I've got exhibit number 5 in this particular example. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that having analysed and broken down the tasks, we're then going to work our way through the exhibits in turn. And what we're going to do is pull the relevant information from those exhibits and put it into our word processor, you know, put it into our plan. So for example, in exhibit 5, don't know if you can make this out on screen, but we're looking at it being difficult to recruit high caliber staff to DCS. And let's say that I'm treating labor as supply, I would take that information and I would paste it into my answer. So I would reference exhibit number 5, and just down towards the bottom, you might be able to make out that I've pasted that information in because I think that's a relevant point for my Porter's 5 forces analysis. And I would literally just methodically, in a disciplined way, work my way through the different exhibits and just say, okay, look, I know that is relevant information for task, you know, C, part 2. Okay, that's a relevant bit of information for task 1, A, part 2. And I would literally take that content and put it into my plan. Now, of course, just putting content in isn't going to be sufficient to earn me any marks. I can't expect to score marks just from pasting content from an exhibit into my answer. All I'm doing is saying that's a relevant point. When I write up my answer, I'm going to use that information and I'm going to develop it. I'm going to provide added value to that point to get the credit that I deserve. And again, workspace management wise, you can imagine the word processor staying on the right hand side, and you can imagine working your way through the different exhibits, keeping them up on the left hand side. And you know, when I was working through this in preparation for this session, it was fine. It looked nice on screen for me. It was plenty enough space for me to have that word processor and the exhibit on the left-hand side as I went through those exhibits one by one. Just a quick word about the scratch pad. It's there if you want it, guys. Really, the only sort of time I've used it is just to make a note of my remaining time. So we recommend that you spend between 40 to 60 minutes for your planning for SBL. What I would tend to do is then just make a quick note of the remaining time to write up my answer, split between the different requirements, you know, in a way that is relevant to the number of marks available. So it's there if you want it. I'm just showing the scratch pad popped up on the bottom left-hand side of the screen here. Really, I'd only tend to use it, as I say, to make a note of the time left to write up my answer. And just to finish off with this illustration, I just wanted to show you the sort of answer that is possible. So on the right-hand side, we've got the word processor, and all I've done here is I've tidied it up a bit. So I've used subheadings from the model, Porter's 5 forces in this case. I've used some wording from the requirement itself as the heading, and I've just developed the points that I've taken from the exhibits and explained why they're relevant. And you can see that the formatting is pretty simple. I've just got the headings being bold. The main thing I want to illustrate is how I've spaced out my answers. So formatting pretty simple, you know, lots of space between each point. And the reason for that is I want the marker to look at this answer, and I want the marker to be comfortable saying, yep, that's a point, it's been developed, 2 marks. That's a point, it's a standalone point, an extra mark, and so on and so on. So if we were going to summarize the approach, we would invest time copying the requirements, the tasks into the word processor area. We would break those requirements down, those tasks down, think about the structure to our answer. We would then work our way through the exhibits, adding in the relevant information as we go through each exhibit in turn. And then we've got plenty of time, having done that, to write our answer up and add our value and hopefully secure lots of marks. So that was, I suppose, a summary of our recommended approach to SP CBE. Really do recommend those videos that Lucy called out. They go into a bit more detail for every subject at SP level on how to approach the exam, and it's guidance from the examiners, guys. You know, it really is useful stuff. And the beauty of the practice platform, of course, is that you can take that recommended approach and you can practice it as many times as you like. And you might tweak it. You know, you might find that actually you prefer having the word processor on the left, or maybe you want to try having the word processor at the top and the exhibits at the bottom. Mess around with it. I've shown you what works for me. It might be slightly different for you. And that's, as I say, the beauty of the practice platform. Before we open up to address some FAQs, I just wanted to call out some, I suppose, frequently asked questions that we've accumulated from the sessions of SPCBE that we've had so far. So students often ask, do I need fast typing skills? And our answer to that is, well, it's not an IT exam, so you're not expected to be touch typing or anything like that. Having said that, one of the drivers for SPCBE is that employers do expect a certain level of IT competence. So you don't need to be typing, you know, touch typing at a huge speed. It really is quality, not quantity, but you do need to have a base level of typing ability. And remember, you've got the opportunity to practice as much as you like on the practice platform. So try and get your typing skills up to a reasonable standard, but don't think you have to excel, and don't think that you're going to pass or fail just based on how quickly you can type. Do you need to save your answers in the live exam? Well, I know I talked about exporting answers or having the option to export answers on the practice platform. You don't need to worry about that at all in the live exam. So in the live exam, it's automatically saved. Your answers will be submitted when you end the exam or when your time runs out. So not something you even need to think about in the live exam at all. Common question is, what response area should I use? So for SBL, you'll have word processor, spreadsheet, and slides. For the other exams, you'll just have word processor and spreadsheet. Now, bear in mind that in exams, they might not be labeled exactly as word processors. It might be a memo, but the functionality is still going to be that of the word processor. Now, general advice is that put your narrative type answers in the word processor and only use the spreadsheet tool when you're doing your detailed calculations. And if you need to use slides, just in SBL, if you need to use slides, it'll be specifically requested in the task. So really at SP level, it's likely that the majority of your answer will be in your word processor, and then you can reference, you can refer to your calculations that you've done in the spreadsheet. And that's, you know, just like in real life, if you're writing a report, you might have the detailed calculations in an appendix, and then your narrative content in the main body of the report. The SP exam environment reflects that as well. So narrative in the word processor, keeping the spreadsheet for those calculations. Okay, and then finally, how should you use the remaining time before the exam? Very common question, very valid question. So if you're studying towards March, you've still got a bit of time to make use of. Question practice. Use the practice platform. Use the approved content that hopefully you've got access to. Use past exams from the ACCA website. You know, try and do as much question practice as you can, but remember to add value to that process as well by marking and reviewing your answers. And why not use the practice platform again to help you do that. Okay, Lucy, I think we've got a bit of time left for any questions that the guys have been asking during the session.
Yes, we have. Thanks, James. Picking out some of the more commonly asked ones, probably the one I would say we've had most questions on relates to, so kind of two related questions. Firstly, about being provided with a word processor and a spreadsheet response area. And we've had some questions around, should I be using both of them? Are there any rules around that? And then because you were using SBL as the example, quite a few students asking for confirmation, really, that they should be writing responses to all of the individual tasks in the one word processor response area. So what could you answer those? That
Sure.
mishmash of questions.
No, that's fine. I understand, and all very valid points. So just coming back to the response area in a bit more detail. I suppose the way to look at it is in the workplace. Irrespective really of what your role is, you are likely to have to produce, some sort of memo, some sort of report, and obviously we as employees have a choice about what program we use to do that. So if I was writing a report, I would use Microsoft Word. It's what ACCA tends to use. I know other people have equivalents. If I needed to, produce a cash flow, maybe for a particular project that we were working on, I would do that cash flow calculation in Excel, in a spreadsheet. And really, that's the sort of mindset we need to have in the exam environment as well. So we will be presented with different response options. That doesn't mean that we have to use them. It doesn't mean that we have to use both. The examiner is looking for you to understand how best to present your answer. So, for example, if you let's use that cash flow example. Let's say you wanted to do a discounted cash flow. What wouldn't be efficient is to set up a table in the word processor and then manually work out every discounted cash flow for each year that you're actually looking at. You'd be much better off doing that in the spreadsheet. What you then wouldn't want to do, though, is write a paragraph in a spreadsheet trying to merge cells to make it legible or readable, then explaining the outcome of that cash flow, that discounted cash flow calculation. So you've got to use I suppose it is professional skills to make use of the tools available to you. So you can imagine in the main part of your answer in the word processor saying, please see discounted cash flow calculation. You will note that in year 3 it fluctuates, whatever your answer happens to be, and you would have used the spreadsheet functionality to help you effectively do that calculation, and then you've just referred to that calculation in the main part of your report, which is likely to be in the word processor. So if I was summarizing our view on this one, you've got those tools available to you. Make use of them in an appropriate way. Don't feel that you have to use it. The only exception to that is where you're in SBL and the task specifically says produce some slides. Now, obviously, for that, you're going to use the slide response option. For any other type of question, use your judgment, guys. But the rule of thumb is main part of your report is likely to be in the word processor, referencing calculations that you do in the spreadsheet. Now, coming back to the second question about SBL, yes, you are going to answer all of your tasks in one word processor document, or all your calculations in one particular spreadsheet. Now, different ways of looking at this, I suppose. It will mean that there's lots of scrolls up and down because you'll have quite a long response. But if you think back to the specimen example that we looked at, it was a consultancy report, and all of the tasks were geared towards producing parts of a consultancy report. Now, if you think about doing that in real life, you'd be using one Word document and you'd be scrolling up or down. So I know that the scrolling is an additional thing to have to worry about, and it links to our workspace management point. But really, I think that's better than having multiple response options, multiple response windows to then go with the different tasks, it would add even more complexity to trying to manage your workspace. So yes, scrolling is an issue. It's something to get used to, but on reflection, I think we're comfortable that it's preferable to having a huge number of response options to juggle as well.
Thanks, James. I'm going to do some sort of quick fire questions, if that's okay, just to get through a few more. Someone's asking about the practice platform. Are there multiple mock exams in there, and can they redo the same one again if they want?
Yes and yes. So there's a minimum of 3 for each strategic professional exam, and do them as many times as you can.
Perfect. Quite a few questions asking this as well. We talked in the video, obviously, and you subsequently talked about it in your screenshots about copying requirements into the response area. People are asking, should you then remove what you've copied across before submitting it?
Ideally, yep. But if you're short of time and you have a choice between going back and tidying up your answer by deleting some of the wording from the requirements, or making a brand new point that's definitely going to get you extra credit, do the latter. So yes, ideally go back and tidy up, but you're not going to lose marks if there's still wording from the requirements in your answer.
Okay. A question here asking if keyboard shortcuts are enabled, like Control-C and Control-V.
Yep, so there are a number of keyboard shortcuts. I think the best thing to do is to look at the guidance documentation that you referenced earlier on, Lucy, for details of exactly what shortcuts are available. So there's a number there, not necessarily as many as the Microsoft suite of products, but I recommend having a look at that guidance document for the detail on that.
Brilliant. And then one question to end on, because we are just about running out of time. We've had a few students asking what we recommend about the use of formulae. So should students be using formulae, or can they just put the answer that they've got to in another way into the response option?
Use the formulae, and I know I need to be quick, but use the formulae to help you save time. Now, actually, in terms of getting credit and getting those follow-through marks, which the markers are always really, really keen to give, yes, they will investigate cells, so they will look to see if you've done a formula, but actually why not make it easier for them by showing your workings as much as possible? And that comes from setting up a table that's easy to follow. It comes from labeling your rows and your columns as nicely as possible. So yeah, use formulas, save yourself time, give the marker the opportunity to investigate your cell and see what formula you've used. But even better and even more important, set out your workings really clearly, label your rows, label your columns, so a marker can say, right, I know that number's not quite right, but I can see what they've tried to do just from how clearly they've set out their workings. So setting out workings clearly is the key here.
Okay, and I think that's a really good piece of advice to end on, actually making friends with the marker as best you can.
Definitely.
In a variety of different ways when it comes to layout and so on. Right, we have reached the end of time, so apologies if we haven't answered your question directly. Hopefully you've got some benefit from the questions we have shared anyway. James, huge thanks to you for the demos that you've done and so on. Thank you to everybody for joining and for your questions, and the best of luck with your upcoming exams. Thanks and bye.